Lisa Martinez sat in the small white room and checked her recording device one more time. She had traveled 3 months to reach this neutral station orbiting the distant planet Kepler 442b. The journey was long and expensive, but this interview would be worth it. No alien veteran from the Terran Coalition War had ever agreed to speak publicly about what happened during those 5 terrible years. The door opened with a soft hiss. Commander Zethkar walked in slowly, his forearms moving carefully at his sides. His gray skin showed deep scars from old wounds, and his compound eyes looked tired. He was tall, maybe 8 feet, with a thin build that made him look fragile, but Lisa knew better. This alien had fought against humans for 5 years and survived. Very few Coalition soldiers could say that. "Thank you for agreeing to this interview," Lisa said in English. The translation device on the table hummed quietly as it converted her words into Zethkar's language. Zethkar nodded and sat down across from her. His chair was specially made for his body shape. "I am not sure why I agreed to this," he said. His voice came through the translator as deep and tired, perhaps because the war has been over for 3 years and my people still wake up screaming from nightmares about your species. Lisa kept her face calm, but inside she felt a chill. The Coalition had been the most powerful military force in the galaxy before they met humans. They controlled thousands of worlds and had never lost a major war. The fact that they feared humans so much even now said something important about what had happened during the conflict. "Let's start with something simple," Lisa said. "What did the Coalition think of humans when first contact was made?" Zethkar's forearms moved in what Lisa recognized as their version of a shrug. "We thought you were primitives. Your technology was centuries behind ours. Your ships were slow and clumsy. Your weapons were basic chemical explosives and metal projectiles. We had energy shields, plasma cannons, and faster-than-light communication across the galaxy." He paused and looked directly at Lisa with his large compound eyes. "We were so very wrong about everything. What changed your mind?" "The Battle of Rigel Prime," Zethkar said immediately. "That was when we first understood that humans do not fight like any other species in the galaxy." Lisa leaned forward. She had heard rumors about Rigel Prime, but no official reports had ever been released. "Can you tell me what happened there?" Zethkar was quiet for a long moment. His 4 hands fidgeted with a small device that Lisa guessed was some kind of stress reliever. "I was part of the 3rd Battalion under General Krickstar. We were ordered to take a small human outpost on Rigel Prime. Intelligence told us there were maybe 15 humans stationed there. We brought 300 soldiers because the general wanted to make sure we had overwhelming force." 300. "Against 15 seems like a lot," Lisa said. "It was not enough," Zethkar replied. "Not nearly enough." The alien veteran stood up and walked to the small window that looked out at the stars. The outpost was built into a rocky hill, very basic construction. We could see their defensive walls from orbit. They looked weak. The humans had no shields, no energy weapons, no advanced technology. Our battle computers calculated a 97% chance of victory with 0 Coalition casualties. What went wrong? Zethkar turned back to face her. Nothing went wrong with our plan. The problem was that humans do not follow the same rules of warfare as the rest of the galaxy. We landed our forces in standard attack formation, 3 waves of 100 soldiers each. The first wave would engage the main defenses. The second wave would flank from the east. The third wave would provide support and handle prisoners. He sat back down heavily. The first wave never made it to the walls. As soon as our soldiers left the landing ships, explosions started going off everywhere. Not from the outpost, from the ground beneath our feet. The humans had somehow planted explosives all around the landing zone without us detecting them from orbit. Lisa made notes on her tablet. How is that possible? Don't Coalition ships have advanced sensors? Of course we do. Our sensors can detect metal, energy signatures, chemical compounds, and biological materials from space. But these explosives were different. Later we learned that humans had buried simple fertilizer bombs mixed with scrap metal. The chemicals were so common that our sensors ignored them. The metal was scattered randomly, so it looked like natural mineral deposits. Zethkar's voice got quieter. 70 soldiers died in the first 30 seconds. The rest scattered and tried to find cover. That was when the real nightmare began. What do you mean? We thought the explosions were the main attack. We expected the humans to come out of their outpost and fight us directly. Instead, nothing happened for 2 hours. Our soldiers found cover behind rocks and waited. The second and third waves landed at different zones to avoid more explosions. We had 230 soldiers surrounding a small outpost held by 15 humans. Zethkar stood up again and began pacing. Then the shooting started, but not from the outpost, from behind us. Somehow human soldiers were in positions we had already secured. They would fire a few shots, kill 2 or 3 of our soldiers, then disappear before we could return fire. How could they move around without being seen? We asked ourselves. The same question for 6 days, Zethkar said. Our soldiers had motion detectors, heat sensors, and communication equipment that could track movement across the entire battlefield. But the humans seemed to appear and disappear like ghosts. He stopped pacing and looked at Lisa. On the 3rd day, we captured one of them, a human named Captain Jake Morrison. We thought finally we would get some answers about their tactics. What? Did he tell you? He laughed, Zethkar said simply. He actually laughed when we questioned him. Then he asked if we were having fun yet. Fun. As if the battle was some kind of game to him. Lisa felt another chill. Did he explain how they were moving around unseen? No. But we figured it out eventually. The humans had spent weeks before our arrival digging tunnels all through the area. Not just simple hiding places. A complete underground network with multiple exits and supply caches. They could move anywhere on the battlefield without being detected because they were traveling below ground. Zethkar sat down again and rubbed his scarred face with one of his hands. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was that they were not trying to win the battle. They were playing with us. What do you mean? Captain Morrison escaped on the 4th day, just walked out of our secure holding area during a shift change. Our guards found a note he left behind. It said, "Thanks for the chat. See you tomorrow." The next morning, Morrison and his squad attacked our command post directly. They killed 8 soldiers, destroyed our communication equipment, and left another note that said, "Having fun yet?" Lisa stopped writing and stared at the alien veteran. They were taunting you. Yes, and it worked. By the 5th day, our soldiers were afraid to leave their positions. They jumped at every sound. They fired at shadows. 3 soldiers were killed by friendly fire because everyone was so nervous. How did the battle end? Zethkar was quiet for a long time. On the 6th day, Morrison contacted us directly on our emergency frequency. He offered to surrender if we agreed to certain terms. General Crickster was so frustrated that he agreed immediately, just to end the nightmare. Morrison surrendered? No, Zethkar said softly. When our soldiers went to the meeting point, they found Morrison and his entire squad sitting around a campfire, cooking food and telling jokes. They had set up a comfortable camp less than half a mile from our main force. They had been there for hours without us knowing. The alien veteran looked directly at Lisa. Morrison told our general that his squad could have killed all of our soldiers on the 1st day if they had wanted to. The explosives, the tunnel attacks, the psychological warfare, it was all just to see how coalition forces would react under pressure. He said his orders were to study our tactics, not to win the battle. Lisa felt her mouth go dry. They were conducting an experiment. Yes, we were laboratory animals to them. And after 6 days of combat, Morrison handed over a complete analysis of our weaknesses, our decision-making patterns, and our equipment limitations. He gave it to us as a gift before his squad left the planet. Zethkar stood up and walked to the door. That was when the Coalition Command realized we were not fighting a war against humans. We were being studied by a species that viewed combat as a learning experience. And they were very, very good students. The interview room fell silent except for the quiet humming of the translation device. Lisa looked at her notes and realized that everything she thought she knew about the Terran Coalition war was wrong. This was not going to be a simple story about military tactics. This was something much more frightening. Lisa watched as Commander Zethkar returned to his seat. His forearms were shaking slightly, and she could see that talking about the Battle of Rigel Prime had upset him. She waited a few moments before speaking again. Commander, you mentioned that humans view combat differently than other species. Can you give me another example? Zethkar closed his compound eyes for a moment. There are so many stories, each one worse than the last. But if you want to understand how humans think about war, I should tell you about Staff Sergeant Amy Collins and the siege of Titan Base. Titan Base? A small outpost on the moon Europa, in your solar system. It was supposed to be an easy target for us. Just 43 human defenders against my entire regiment of 800 soldiers. The base had strategic value because it controlled shipping routes between Earth and the outer colonies. Lisa made notes as Zethkar spoke. When did this battle take place? 2 years into the war. By then we had learned to be more careful around humans. We brought overwhelming force and planned for a quick victory. Intelligence told us the base was poorly defended and low on supplies. We expected the siege to last maybe 2 weeks. How long did it actually last? Zethkar made a sound that the translator rendered as bitter laughter. 8 months. 8 months of absolute hell. He stood up and began pacing again. Lisa noticed this seemed to be a habit when he talked about difficult memories. The base was built into the side of a large crater. Very basic construction, like most human military buildings. We could see all the defensive positions from our ships. There were 3 main gun towers, a communication center, and living quarters for maybe 50 soldiers. That sounds straightforward enough. That is what we thought. My regiment landed 2 miles from the base and set up a standard siege perimeter. We had heavy weapons, energy shields, and air support. The humans had kinetic weapons and simple explosive devices. Our battle computers calculated victory within 72 hours. Zethkar stopped pacing and looked at Lisa. Staff Sergeant Collins changed everything on the first day. What did she do? She spoke to us, in perfect coalition language. Her voice came over our communication channels while we were setting up our equipment. She knew all of our names, our ranks, our home planets, and details about our families that should have been classified information. Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. How could she know those things? We never found out. But Collins used that information to make the siege personal. She would call individual soldiers by name and ask about their children back home. She would mention details about their lives that only close friends should know. It was psychological, warfare at a level we had never experienced. Zethkar sat back down and picked up his stress device again. On the second day, Collins began making predictions about our tactical plans. She would broadcast messages telling us exactly what our commanders were going to order, sometimes hours before the orders were given. Was she guessing? No. She was always right. Every single time. Collins would say things like, Captain Vextel will order the 3rd Squad to advance on the East Tower at 0800 hours tomorrow. They will use flash grenades and approach from the lower crater rim. Then, exactly as she predicted, Captain Vextel would give those orders. Lisa stopped writing. That's impossible, unless she had access to your command communications. That is what we thought at first. We changed all our encryption codes and communication frequencies. It did not matter. Collins kept making accurate predictions. After a week, our soldiers started to believe she could read their minds. The alien veteran was quiet for a moment. The psychological effect was devastating. Soldiers began to doubt their orders before they received them. Unit commanders stopped making tactical decisions because they knew Collins would announce their plans to everyone. What happened next? Collins escalated. She started leaving personal messages for individual soldiers, private recordings that would appear in their equipment lockers, their food supplies, even inside their sealed helmets. She knew things about their personal lives, their fears, their relationships back home. Zethkar's voice got quieter. One soldier named Corporal Tixmore found a recording where Collins talked about his daughter's birthday party that had happened 3 days earlier, back on his home planet. She described the decorations, the gifts, even what cake his daughter had requested. Tixmore had not received any communication from home about the party yet. How could she know about events happening on other planets? We never figured that out. But the effect on morale was terrible. Soldiers started to think Collins had spies everywhere, that she was watching their families, that nowhere was safe from human intelligence gathering. Lisa made more notes. Did the coalition forces try to attack the base directly? Of course, many times. But Collins had turned Titan Base into something that defied military logic. Every attack we launched would fail in ways that seemed impossible. Zethkar stood up and walked to the window again. For example, we would plan an assault on the East Gun Tower. Before our soldiers even moved from their positions, explosions would start going off in areas we thought were secure. Not random explosions. Precise attacks that would cut off our supply lines and communication links to that specific assault team. She was anticipating your moves. More than that. Collins was orchestrating events so that our own tactics would work against us. She would trigger avalanches that blocked our retreat routes. She would jam our communications at exactly the right moments to cause confusion. She would time equipment failures so that our weapons would malfunction during critical moments. The alien veteran turned back to Lisa. But the worst part was not the tactical defeats. It was how Collins made us feel like we were fighting against fate itself. What do you mean? Everything bad that could happen would happen at the worst possible time. Soldiers would slip and fall at crucial moments. Equipment would break down, just when we needed it most. Weather would change suddenly to favor human defensive positions. After 2 months, my soldiers were convinced that Collins could control luck itself. Lisa found herself leaning forward. Was it really luck, or was she manipulating events somehow? Both. We learned later that Collins had spent months before our arrival studying everything about Europa's environment. She knew the weather patterns, the geological structure, the seasonal changes in ice formation. She used that knowledge to predict when natural events would occur and planned her defenses around them. Zethkar sat down again. But Collins also created her own luck. She had positioned sensors and remote devices all around the crater that could trigger landslides, ice storms, and equipment malfunctions at precisely the right moments. She turned the entire battlefield into a weapon. How did your soldiers react to this? Panic. After 3 months, we had soldiers refusing to leave their bunkers. They were convinced that Collins could see the future, and that any action they took would lead to disaster. Some soldiers started praying to their gods before simple tasks like checking their equipment. The alien veteran's 4 hands clenched into fists. Collins encouraged this fear. She would broadcast philosophical messages about fate and destiny. She would quote ancient coalition religious texts that most soldiers had forgotten since childhood. She made them believe that the universe itself was fighting against them. That's psychological warfare at an incredibly sophisticated level. Yes, and it worked perfectly. By the 4th month, we were losing more soldiers to accidents and friendly fire than to direct combat with the humans. Collins had weaponized our own minds against us. Lisa looked up from her notes. How did the siege finally end? Zethkar was quiet for a long time. Collins sent me a personal message in the 6th month. She said she was impressed with how long we had lasted, and that she was ready to end the siege whenever we were ready to leave. She offered to let you withdraw? More than that. She provided us with detailed intelligence about human military positions throughout the solar system, information that was worth more than taking Titan Base would have been. She said it was a gift to show respect for our persistence. The alien veteran looked directly at Lisa. Collins had 43 soldiers under her command. I had 800. She held that base for 8 months not because she had to, but because she wanted to study how long coalition forces could function under psychological pressure. Another experiment. Yes. And at the end, Collins and her entire garrison walked out of Titan Base carrying their weapons and equipment. They boarded a transport ship while my soldiers watched from their positions. As they were leaving, Collins broadcast one final message. What did she say? Zethkar closed his compound eyes. She thanked us for participating in her research project. She said the data we had provided would be very useful for understanding coalition military psychology. Then she told us that the base's self-destruct system would activate in exactly 30 minutes, which would give us enough time to retreat to a safe distance. Lisa felt her blood go cold. She had rigged the entire base to explode? The explosion was visible from orbit. If Collins had chosen to detonate it during any of our assault attempts, she could have killed hundreds of my soldiers. Instead, She used it as a demonstration of how completely she had controlled the entire situation. The next morning, Lisa arrived at the interview room early. She had spent the night reviewing her notes and trying to understand what Commander Zethkar had told her. The stories about Captain Jake Morrison and Staff Sergeant Amy Collins were disturbing, but she sensed that worse revelations were coming. Zethkar entered the room looking even more tired than before. His scarred gray skin seemed paler, and his compound eyes moved nervously around the room before settling on Lisa. "You mentioned a medic named Danny Rodriguez," Lisa said after they both sat down. "You said he became the most feared individual in galactic military history. How is that possible for a medic?" Zethkar picked up his stress device and held it with all four hands. "Before I tell you about Rodriguez, you must understand something about coalition military culture. We have strict rules about medical personnel in warfare. Medics are considered neutral. They treat wounded soldiers from both sides. They carry special markings that identify them as non-combatants. Shooting a medic is considered a war crime across the entire galaxy. Those sound like reasonable rules. They are reasonable rules when fighting reasonable enemies. Humans are not reasonable. They take every rule of civilized warfare and find ways to use those rules as weapons." Lisa leaned forward. "What did Rodriguez do?" "I first encountered him during the Outer Rim campaigns in the third year of the war. My battalion was fighting human forces on a planet called Kepler 186F. The terrain was mostly jungle, which made traditional large-scale battles impossible. Instead, we had small skirmishes between patrol groups." Zethkar stood up and began his usual pacing. "During one engagement, several of my soldiers were wounded by human explosive devices. Rodriguez appeared at the battlefield wearing clear medical markings and carrying standard medic equipment. He offered to treat our wounded." "That seems normal for a medic." "Yes. Rodriguez treated our soldiers with great skill. He stopped bleeding, repaired damaged organs, and gave them medicine for pain. My soldiers were grateful. They said Rodriguez was kind and gentle, that he took as much care with coalition wounded as he did with human casualties." Lisa made notes. "So what was the problem?" The problem became clear 3 days later. The soldiers Rodriguez had treated began to feel sick. Not badly sick at first, just tired and weak. Our medical officers examined them but could not find anything wrong. Zethkar stopped pacing and looked at Lisa. By the end of the week, those soldiers could barely stand up. They had constant headaches, blurred vision, and trembling hands. They could not hold weapons steady or operate equipment properly. Rodriguez had poisoned them? Not exactly poison, something much more clever. Our medical team eventually discovered that Rodriguez had injected our soldiers with a biological agent that would slowly affect their nervous systems. The agent was designed to make them unable to fight effectively without causing permanent damage or death. Lisa felt a chill. He was disabling enemy soldiers while pretending to help them, yes, but that was only the beginning. Over the following months, Rodriguez appeared at dozens of battle sites. Each time he would treat coalition wounded with apparent skill and kindness. And each time, those soldiers would develop mysterious illnesses that made them useless for combat. Zethkar sat back down heavily. The worst part was that Rodriguez genuinely saved lives. Our soldiers who would have died from their wounds survived because of his medical skill, but they also could never fight against humans again. How long did it take for Coalition Command to figure out what was happening? 4 months. By then, Rodriguez had treated over 300 Coalition soldiers. We had an entire medical facility filled with troops who were alive but could not return to duty. Our commanders were facing a choice between letting wounded soldiers die or accepting help from a medic who was systematically removing our fighters from the war. The alien veteran picked up his stress device again. Rodriguez was brilliant. He had found a way to follow all the rules of galactic warfare while completely destroying our military effectiveness. He was saving lives and ending careers at the same time. What did Coalition Command decide to do? They issued orders to shoot medics on sight. It was the first time in galactic history that any military force had officially targeted medical personnel. The decision caused massive controversy throughout the coalition government. Zethkar's voice got quieter. But Rodriguez had anticipated this reaction. He began traveling with armed escorts and broadcasting messages to coalition forces. He offered to continue treating our wounded, but only if we promised not to shoot other human medics. Lisa looked up from her notes. He was using your moral principles against you. Exactly. Rodriguez created a situation where we had to choose between our ethical standards and our military effectiveness. If we shot medics, we became war criminals. If we let medics treat our wounded, we lost soldiers to biological warfare. How did coalition soldiers react to this dilemma? Panic and confusion. Soldiers did not know whether to accept medical treatment or let themselves die from wounds. Some units started refusing to engage human forces entirely because they knew that getting wounded meant facing an impossible choice. Zethkar stood up and walked to the window. But Rodriguez was not finished. In the 5th month of the Outer Rim campaigns, he did something that broke the minds of coalition military leadership. What happened? A major battle took place near the city of New Geneva on Kepler 186F. My regiment was part of a large assault force trying to take the city from human defenders. The battle lasted 2 days and resulted in heavy casualties on both sides. The alien veteran turned back to Lisa. Rodriguez appeared on the battlefield after the fighting ended. He set up a medical station exactly halfway between coalition and human positions. Then he broadcast a message to both sides offering to treat any wounded soldier regardless of species or allegiance. He was treating everyone? Yes. Coalition soldiers and human soldiers side by side in the same medical facility. Rodriguez worked for 18 hours straight, saving lives and performing surgery on anyone who needed help. Zethkar's 4 hands clenched into fists. But here is what made it truly terrifying. The coalition soldiers Rodriguez treated developed his usual nervous system problems and could not fight effectively. The human soldiers he treated made full recoveries and returned to duty within days. Lisa stopped writing and stared at the alien veteran. He was using different treatments on different species. Correct? Rodriguez had developed 2 separate medical protocols. One that genuinely healed human soldiers, and another that healed coalition soldiers while making them unable to continue fighting. He performed both types of treatment in the same facility at the same time, while making it look like he was providing identical care to everyone. That's incredibly sophisticated biological warfare disguised as humanitarian medicine. Yes, and it got worse. Rodriguez began training other human medics in his techniques. Within months, every human medical unit had the ability to disable coalition forces while appearing to provide proper medical care. Zethkar returned to his seat. The psychological effect on coalition troops was devastating. Soldiers became afraid to get wounded because they knew human medics might treat them, but they were also afraid to refuse treatment because they might die from their injuries. How did this affect coalition morale? It destroyed it completely. Soldiers started to believe that humans could turn any act of kindness into a weapon. If a human offered food, it might be poisoned. If a human offered medical care, it might be biological warfare. If a human offered to help, it was probably a trap. Lisa made more notes. Did Rodriguez ever explain why he was doing this? Yes. In the final month of the Outer Rim campaigns, Rodriguez sent a recorded message to Coalition Command. He said that his mission was to demonstrate that humans could end the war without killing anyone if they chose to do so. What did he mean? Zethkar was quiet for a moment. Rodriguez explained that he could have used deadly biological agents instead of disabling ones. He could have poisoned coalition soldiers instead of just making them unable to fight. He said, his methods proved that humans were showing mercy even while conducting warfare. He was being merciful by destroying military effectiveness instead of destroying lives. That was his argument. Rodriguez claimed that humans were offering coalition forces a choice between honorable defeat and total annihilation. He said that any species wise enough to accept defeat would be allowed to survive with dignity. The alien veteran looked directly at Lisa. The most terrifying part was that Rodriguez was completely sincere. He genuinely believed he was being kind by giving coalition soldiers a way to leave the war alive. He saw his biological warfare as an act of compassion. Did Coalition Command accept his offer? Not immediately. But Rodriguez had made his point. He had shown that humans could neutralize entire military units without firing a single shot. Every coalition soldier who encountered human medics became a living demonstration of human technological superiority and strategic thinking. Zethkar stood up and walked toward the door. By the end of the Outer Rim campaigns, we had thousands of soldiers who were alive but unable to fight. Lisa spent her lunch break walking around the station trying to clear her head. The stories about human warfare tactics were becoming more disturbing with each interview session. She had originally thought this would be a straightforward piece about military history. Instead, she was documenting something that challenged everything she knew about human nature. When she returned to the interview room, Commander Zethkar was already waiting. He sat perfectly still, all four arms resting on the table. His compound eyes stared at a point somewhere beyond the walls as if he was seeing something from his past. "Commander, are you ready to continue?" Lisa asked gently. Zethkar focused on her slowly. "The story I'm about to tell you happened in the 4th year of the war. By then, coalition forces had learned to fear human tactical thinking. We had developed new protocols for dealing with human psychological warfare. We thought we understood the limits of what humans could accomplish. What changed your mind this time?" Lieutenant Colonel Kate Murphy and Operation Shepherd's Call. It was a rescue mission that should have been impossible according to every law of military science, but Murphy did not seem to care about what was supposed to be impossible. Lisa prepared her recording device as Zethkar began to pace. "Can you tell me about the situation that led to this mission?" "I was commanding the prison facility on Voss 7th. It was one of our most secure installations, designed to hold high-value prisoners from across the galaxy. The facility was built into the side of a mountain with 3 separate defensive rings and natural barriers on all sides." "How many coalition troops were guarding it?" 2,000 soldiers plus automated defense systems and orbital monitoring stations. The facility had never been successfully attacked in over 50 years of operation. Coalition Command considered it absolutely secure. Zethkar stopped pacing and looked at Lisa. "We were holding 200 human prisoners of war there. Most of them were captured during major battles in the previous year. Intelligence officers, ship captains, special forces operatives, valuable prisoners that humans would want to recover." "So you expected a rescue attempt?" "Of course. But we had prepared for every possible scenario. Large-scale assault forces would be detected by our orbital sensors days before they could reach the planet. Small infiltration teams would be stopped by the defensive rings. The facility itself was built into solid rock, so underground approaches were impossible." The alien veteran sat down and picked up his stress device. "Human Command sent Lieutenant Colonel Kate Murphy with 18 Special Forces operatives. 18 soldiers against 2,000. Our tactical computers calculated their chances of success at less than 1%. What was Murphy's plan? We never figured that out completely, even after the operation was over. Murphy seemed to approach the mission like she was solving a puzzle rather than planning a military operation. She spent weeks studying our defensive systems not to find weaknesses but to understand how they worked." Lisa made notes as Zethkar continued. "The first sign that something unusual was happening came from our orbital sensors. We detected a small human ship approaching the planet, but it was not trying to hide. The ship broadcast standard diplomatic codes and requested permission to land at our main spaceport. They announced themselves? Yes, the ship claimed to be carrying medical supplies for coalition forces. This was not unusual. The Red Cross organization often delivered humanitarian aid to both sides during the war. But something felt wrong about this particular ship." Zethkar stood up again and resumed pacing. "I ordered additional security checks on the ship and its crew. Everything appeared normal. The medical supplies were genuine. The crew had proper documentation. There were no hidden weapons or suspicious equipment." "But you were still suspicious?" "Yes. My experience with humans had taught me that when things seemed normal, it usually meant they were planning something extraordinary. I increased security around the prison facility and put all units on high alert." The alien veteran stopped at the window and stared out at the stars. "For 3 days, nothing happened. The medical supply ship completed its delivery and left the system. Our sensors showed no other human vessels in the area. I began to think that perhaps I had been overly cautious." "When did Murphy make her move?" "On the 4th night. But she did not attack the prison facility. Instead, my communication officer received a call on our emergency frequency. It was Murphy, speaking perfect coalition language, asking if I had a few minutes to chat. Lisa looked up from her notes. She called you directly? Yes. Murphy was somehow using our own communication system from inside the prison facility. She was already past all 3 defensive rings, past the automated security systems, and inside the most secure building on the planet. Zethkar turned back to face Lisa. I asked Murphy how she had gotten inside. She laughed and said it was actually quite simple once you understood that coalition security systems were designed to keep people out, not to keep track of people who were already inside. What did she mean by that? Murphy explained that she and her team had not infiltrated the facility from outside. They had been inside for 3 days, ever since the medical supply ship had arrived. They had somehow hidden themselves among the legitimate medical personnel and supplies. The alien veteran sat down heavily. But that was impossible. We had scanned everything that came into the facility. We had verified the identity of every person who entered. There was no way for 18 human soldiers to hide among a small medical team. How did they do it? Murphy never told us the complete details, but she gave us enough information to understand the basic approach. Her team had used advanced camouflage technology to disguise themselves as coalition medical personnel. Not just visual disguises. They had somehow altered their biological signatures to match our species. Lisa stopped writing and stared at Zethkar. They made themselves look like coalition soldiers? More than that. They had modified their body chemistry, their heat signatures, even their scent markers. Our sensors could not tell the difference between Murphy's team and genuine coalition personnel. They had literally become undetectable to our security systems. That level of biological disguise seems impossible. That is what we thought. But Murphy had 18 months to plan this operation. Her team had studied captured coalition technology, analyzed biological samples from prisoners, and developed techniques that we did not know were possible. Zethkar picked up his stress device with all 4 hands. While Murphy and I were talking, explosions started going off throughout the facility. Not random explosions, precise demolitions that disabled our communication systems, our automated defenses, and our backup power generators. Her team was destroying the facility's defenses. Yes, but they were doing it from inside the security perimeter, using our own maintenance tunnels and service areas. Murphy's soldiers had spent 3 days studying the facility's layout and placing explosive charges in exactly the right locations. The alien veteran stood up and began pacing again. Within 30 minutes, the prison facility had been completely neutralized. No coalition soldiers were killed, but all of our weapons, communication equipment, and security systems were destroyed. How did Murphy get the prisoners out? That was the most impressive part of the operation. Murphy had not just planned to rescue the human prisoners, she had prepared a complete escape route that included transportation, supplies, and safe passage through coalition space. Zethkar stopped pacing and looked directly at Lisa. Murphy told me that her team had been monitoring coalition military communications for weeks. They knew the exact schedule of every patrol ship, supply convoy, and security checkpoint between Voss 7th and human territory. She had planned the entire escape route in advance. More than that, Murphy had arranged for the escape to look like a routine prisoner transfer. Her team had forged all the necessary documentation, created false orders, and established fake communication protocols that would allow 200 human prisoners to travel through coalition space without being questioned. Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. She had infiltrated your entire command structure. Yes. And Murphy proved it by broadcasting the current locations and planned movements of every coalition military unit in the sector. Information that should have been known only to our highest-level commanders. Zethkar returned to his seat. But the most terrifying part came at the end of our conversation. Murphy asked if I wanted to surrender the facility peacefully, or if I preferred to make the rescue more challenging for her team. She was giving you a choice? Yes. Murphy explained that her mission was to rescue the human prisoners with minimal casualties on both sides. She said that if I cooperated, no coalition soldiers would be harmed. If I chose to resist, her team was prepared to neutralize the entire garrison. The alien veteran was quiet for a moment. I asked Murphy what would happen to me and my soldiers if I surrendered. She said we would be given transportation back to Coalition territory and a complete briefing on the security weaknesses she had discovered in our prison system. She was offering to help you improve your defenses. Exactly. Murphy said that. Humans preferred to fight opponents who could provide interesting challenges. Weak defenses made for boring operations. Lisa arrived at the interview room early on the final day. She had spent the previous evening reviewing all her notes from the past 4 sessions. The pattern was clear and terrifying. Humans did not fight wars to win territory or destroy enemies. They fought wars to learn and to teach. Every story Commander Zethkar had told showed the same disturbing truth. Humans treated warfare as education. When Zethkar entered the room, he looked different. His forearms moved more slowly, and his compound eyes seemed even more tired than before. Lisa sensed that this final session would be the most difficult for him. Commander, you mentioned Major Alex Thompson and the conversation that ended the war. Can you tell me about that? Zethkar sat down without his usual pacing. He held his stress device but did not fidget with it. Thompson was different from the other humans I had encountered during the war. He was not a combat soldier or a special operations officer. He was a strategist, someone who thought about the big picture rather than individual battles. When did you meet him? I never met Thompson personally, but his influence on the end of the war was felt by every coalition commander. Thompson contacted our high command directly in the final year of the conflict and requested a meeting with our military leadership. Lisa made notes as Zethkar continued. This was unusual because humans had never shown interest in formal negotiations before. They preferred to communicate through their actions on the battlefield. But Thompson said he had important information that coalition leaders needed to understand. What kind of information? That was what made Coalition High Command curious enough to agree to the meeting. Thompson did not offer to discuss surrender terms or peace negotiations. Instead, he said he wanted to show coalition leaders what the war had really been about from the human perspective. Zethkar finally began his familiar pacing. The meeting took place on a neutral station similar to this one. Thompson arrived alone with no guards or weapons. He carried only a small data device and a simple presentation screen. What did he show them? Everything. Thompson had complete records of every major battle, every tactical innovation, every psychological warfare technique that humans had used during the 5-year conflict. But more than that, he had detailed analysis of how coalition forces had responded to each human strategy. The alien veteran stopped pacing and looked at Lisa. Thompson explained that humans had not been trying to win the war in any traditional sense. They had been conducting the largest military research project in galactic history, using coalition forces as test subjects for studying warfare itself. Lisa felt her blood go cold. The entire war was an experiment? Yes. Thompson showed coalition leaders charts and graphs documenting how human military capabilities had improved throughout the conflict. Every battle had taught humans something new about tactics, technology, psychology, or strategy. The war had been designed from the beginning as a learning experience. Zethkar sat back down heavily. But that was not the most frightening revelation. Thompson then showed coalition leaders what humans had learned about them during the war. What do you mean? Complete behavioral profiles of every coalition species. Detailed analysis of our decision-making patterns, our cultural weaknesses, our technological limitations, and our military doctrines. Thompson had information about coalition society that our own leaders did not fully understand. The alien veteran picked up his stress device with trembling hands. Thompson explained that humans had infiltrated every level of coalition civilization during the war, not just military installations. Government buildings, research facilities, civilian infrastructure, even private homes and schools. Lisa stopped writing and stared at Zethkar. They had spies everywhere. More than spies. Thompson revealed that thousands of humans had been living among coalition populations for years before the war even began. They had taken jobs, formed relationships, started families, and become integrated into our society while gathering intelligence. That level of infiltration would take decades to accomplish. Exactly. Thompson told coalition leaders that humans had been preparing for potential conflict with the coalition for over 30 years. The war itself had lasted only 5 years, but human preparation had been ongoing for much longer. Zethkar stood up and walked to the window. Thompson then showed coalition leaders the most terrifying information of all: complete technical specifications for every coalition weapon, ship design, communication system, and defensive installation. Information that should have been impossible for outsiders to obtain. How could humans have access to classified military technology? Thompson explained that human infiltrators had not just gathered intelligence. They had actively participated in developing coalition military technology. Some of our most advanced weapon systems had been designed with input from humans who were pretending to be coalition scientists and engineers. Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. Humans helped design coalition weapons? Yes, and Thompson proved it by demonstrating detailed knowledge of weaknesses built into coalition military equipment. Weaknesses that could be exploited by anyone who understood how the systems really worked. Zethkar turned back to face Lisa. But Thompson was not finished. He then showed coalition leaders what would happen if the war continued. What did he show them? Detailed plans for the complete destruction of coalition civilization, not through military conquest but through economic collapse, social disruption, and technological sabotage. Thompson had blueprints for dismantling our society from within using the human agents who were already in place. The alien veteran returned to his seat. Thompson explained that humans could have implemented these plans at any point during the war. They could have destroyed coalition supply lines, crashed our economy, or triggered civil wars between different species. The fact that they had not done so was a demonstration of human restraint. He was showing them that humans had been holding back. Exactly. Thompson said that the war had been conducted according to rules that humans had imposed on themselves, not because they were limited by coalition resistance. Humans could have ended the conflict in months instead of years if they had chosen to do so. Lisa looked up from her notes. Why did humans drag out the war for 5 years if they could have won quickly? Because a quick victory would not have provided enough data for their research project. Thompson explained that humans needed time to study how coalition forces adapted to different types of pressure. A short war would have been less educational. Zethkar was quiet for a moment. Thompson then made coalition leaders an offer that they could not refuse. He said humans were prepared to end their research project and withdraw from coalition space. In exchange, humans wanted 2 things. What were his demands? First, formal recognition of human territory and sovereignty. Second, an agreement that the coalition would share all scientific and technological research with human authorities on an ongoing basis. The alien veteran looked directly at Lisa. Thompson explained that humans were not interested in controlling coalition territory or ruling over other species. They wanted to continue learning, and they believed that cooperation would be more educational than continued conflict. The coalition agreed to these terms? They had no choice. Thompson had demonstrated that humans could destroy coalition civilization whenever they chose to do so. The only reason the coalition still existed was because humans found it more useful, intact, than destroyed. Zethkar stood up and walked toward the door. But Thompson saved the most disturbing revelation for last. He told coalition leaders that the war with them had been only a small part of human military research. Humans were simultaneously conducting similar experiments with dozens of other species across the galaxy. Lisa felt her mouth go dry. Other wars, other conflicts, other research projects, other learning experiences. Thompson said that humans were in the process of studying every major military power in the galaxy. The coalition war had been just one experiment among many. The alien veteran paused at the door. Thompson ended the meeting by thanking coalition leaders for their participation in human research. He said the data they had provided would be very useful for understanding galactic military capabilities and would help humans prepare for future challenges. What did he mean by future challenges? Zethkar opened the door but did not leave. Thompson explained that humans were not the only intelligent species in the universe. There were other civilizations beyond our galaxy, some of them potentially hostile. Humans were using conflicts like the Coalition War to prepare for threats that most galactic species did not even know existed. Humans were preparing to defend the galaxy, or to expand beyond it. Thompson was not clear about human long-term intentions, but he made it obvious that everything humans had learned from the Coalition War was being applied to much larger projects that we could not even imagine. The alien veteran looked back at Lisa one final time. That day, Coalition leaders realized that surrendering to humans was not really surrendering. It was joining a research project that was so vast and complex that our entire civilization was just a small part of it. And that's why the Coalition agreed to the peace terms?